Hey guys, thanks for watching. My name's Brad. This is the Doofwagon, as it's affectionately known. It's actually a 1988 Red Devil. It's been hacked apart and put back together to be a purpose-built autocross machine. So this car spends all of its life in parking lots and at airports, driving around cones as quickly as possible. So it's darn fun to drive. We've spent a lot of time, when I say we, I mean my co-driver Dan Wheeler and I, have spent a lot of time in the last 2 years. I've owned the car for 5, but over the last 2 years, making a lot of changes to really make it be as good as it can be at autocross. So when you think of autocross, you think of high rates of transition, so the car needs to go from turning left to turning right really fast, going down slaloms, sweepers that aren't terribly large but need to be as quick as possible. So this car needs to basically turn on a dime and go from turning left to turning right as quickly as possible. So one of the things we identified that was an issue with the car was we felt that its roll centers were kind of out of whack with what we thought they should be. So the car, like I said, was an '89 Red Devil. It was set up for road racing, and it has a logbook. It was road raced for a number of years before it turned into an autocross only car. That was before I got it. I've only autocrossed this car. I've owned it, like I said, for about 5 years. It's just dumb fun to drive. If you ever get a chance to go out and drive someone's F-Mod, do it. You will absolutely love it. It is noisy because it's a 2-stroke, but it's probably the most fun I've had out on an autocross course, and I've been in most every type of car that's available, from kart to Corvette, everything in between. So it's quite fun to drive. So anyway, back to the story of the car. Like I said, it was a road race only car. Now it's autocross only, and the changes that we were trying to make to get away from some of the road racing handling characteristics that it had to more autocross centric ones. Were adjusting the roll centers. So up front, the roll center was really low. It was actually below ground. About, from our measurements, it was measuring to be about 3 to 4 inches below ground. That does some handling issues. That presents some handling issues with the car. I won't go into that in this video. But the goal was to raise that roll center. So we did that by moving the lower control arms. So these are the lower control arms, obviously lower control arm, upper control arm, and this shiny bit of aluminum up front, and I'll grab the camera and show you in a second, is the tie rod. By raising those up, we have raised the roll center. We also fixed a couple other things with the car that had some issues with what's called anti-dive. So that lower control arm wasn't parallel with the ground, it was tilted down in the front. So when the car was under braking, that lower control arm didn't want to move at all, so we would lose some suspension movement up front because there were a lot of forces involved. And then in the rear, we also raised we lowered the roll center. It used to be really high, it used to be 9 inches off the ground. We've now lowered it so it's only a couple inches off the ground. So they're much closer in line now before the roll axis, which is basically if you look at the side of the car where the front roll center is and the rear roll center is. The front was really low, the back was really high, so it had this really steep roll axis. The roll axis now is much more, we'll say, parallel with the ground now. So our front should be right around ground level. Our rear should be, well, I can show you exactly where the rear is in just a second when I grab the camera. But I think that's about it as far as the history of the car. It's been the Nationals 3 times now. My first year, which was my first time ever going to solo nationals, was so much fun. I learned a ton, and my goal was to get not last, or as we affectionately call it, not DFL. And I'll let you fill in the blank on what the F stands for, but it was not dead last. So, and I achieved that. I got second to last, so I was pretty happy. My second year was just try to improve on that, and I did. And I moved up a couple spots and had a bad first day, but it was overcome by my second day, and I still met a bunch more guys, have really gotten to know a bunch of the other drivers in the class, and it's just such a great group of people there. Absolutely love it. And then to bring us to last year, where we had just crazy drama. I'll probably have to make another video just about that story, but I'll tell it to you really quickly. The Cliff Notes version is, we were scheduled to drive Thursday and Friday, and on Wednesday we blew up the engine. So, or on Tuesday, sorry, on Tuesday we blew up the engine. Wednesday we got a new engine brought to us and put it in the car, went down through tech, and then Thursday we were on grid at like 8 a.m. So it was quite the ordeal, but we got through it and had a blast. My co-driver finished one spot out of the trophies. I was a couple spots behind him, but it was good times. So, but yeah, the car's tons of fun to drive, and let me show you a couple other weird idiosyncrasies with F-Mod and with this car specifically, and I think you'll get a kick out of it. All right, so as you can see, we are here at the front of the car. Master brake cylinders up front. Again, as I said, lower control arm, upper control arm, and then the tie rod that goes to our small little steering box in here. The car is obviously under construction, getting ready for the season this year, but it's a good chance to show you some of the internal workings of how this particular F-Mod runs. Its front suspension is unique. It has, on the lower control arm, it has this, I guess we'll call it the push rod. I don't know, I mean, it has this lever that sticks off the lower control arm, and that actuates our canister, which holds a rubber spring inside there. As a matter of fact, that rubber spring, which I have one here, I can dig one out for you. It's a 2-inch diameter, 1-inch thick piece of rubber. It's held inside this canister. Actually, let me grab one real quick. Bear with me. Grab one out of the car, out of the box here. So this is what they look like. It's just a rubber puck. This one happens to be 40 durometer. It's not what I run on the front, but it's close. You can see this one's pretty squishy. So this sits in here like that, essentially, and we squeeze it through its axis inside those front pucks. So you can see when I jump on the car a little bit, it's set up pretty stiff right now, but you know, obviously, you know, when the car needs to go into what we call bump, so when the suspension compresses, it lifts this lower control arm, which then squeezes on the spring. We dampen the car, not through shocks, we're not allowed those, by putting friction on this lower control arm. So it makes it basically hard to move, and that means that, you know, if you go over a bump, the car doesn't sit there and just bounce and bounce and bounce. So there's a little bit of friction by, you know, cranking down this whole system. I've got some friction material, which is basically just a little piece of, I don't know if you can see it in there, a little piece of acrylic. And then by tightening this bolt, I've got, this is drawn forward, and we put friction on that material right there, and that's what prevents the system from just sitting there bouncing and bouncing, because that friction acts as a dampener. Our upper control arm is just here to help locate the spindle, which is right here. So the upper control arm, and then our tie rod. So as I said before, the lower control arm was pitched down in the front. The overall system was a little bit lower. It's what made the front roll center to be so low, and it's what provided the anti-dive, which was just way too much. So we've leveled everything out. We've got everything welded back on the car. Spent a lot of time this off-season between 2016 and 2017 to get the system where we think it should be. So we're really hopeful this year that these changes will be for the better. Another big change we made was we had a lot of bump steer, so this tie rod was way too long. So by lengthening the rod that connects to our steering box, we were able to get everything back in alignment so that everything is swinging correctly. Just, you know, without getting into too much technical detail, just fixed a lot of geometry issues with the front end of the car. So we're very, like I said, hopeful that these will all be for the better. But who knows, maybe it'll feel completely the same, but I doubt it. So going back towards the end of the car, you can see we've got some stuff installed, radiator, gas tank, not a lot of it's all plumbed in. Looks like I've got the radiators done, but not the gas. Still got a lot of work to do on the car to get it ready for the year, but I can show you some other things that we did on the car. The two side pods on each side of the driver's compartment are basically what house You know, on my car, it's where they house the radiators. It's where I house gas tank. Battery goes on the other side. Last year, there wasn't a whole lot of structure outside in the side pods. They were quite floppy, and that always bugged me. So last year, the car was exceptionally light. I weigh a little over 200 pounds. The minimum weight for the car with driver is 800 pounds. So when I'm in the car, the whole system, when we get scaled, needs to weigh over 800 pounds. Last year we had almost 50 pounds of ballast in the car with me in it. So some of my co-drivers who are much smaller than I am, I believe Jessica, she had, well over 100 pounds of ballast in the car. I think she had like 130 pounds of ballast in the car or something like that. So there was a lot of weight that we could add to the car, and hopefully add it in good, smart spots to make the car more reliable and stronger and more stiff, to make it handle better, lots of those things. So we decided to do that this year. One of the things was all this extra steel that you see welded on, that goes all the way around the side pod, this support bar that's integral to the suspension. All of that stuff is all new this year, hopefully to, like I said, give this some structure and just make the car a little bit easier to deal with day to day and less maintenance headaches. So going into the rear suspension here, this one is pretty tricky. So we started from the ground up, completely blank sheet of paper, decided this is what we think makes a good suspension system for an F-Mod in Autocross. We really tried to hone in on what makes a good suspension system work for Autocross with our particular rule set. So again, this is a different type of rubber. This is actually a bump stop that's 2 inches in diameter and 1 inch thick. It's got a little bit of squeeze on it right now because it's supporting some of the weight of the car, but this still fits within the same rule set. And then by doing a lot of math, and Dan and I have been laboring over this for actually a couple of years now, because we did a kind of a rough draft last year that worked mostly, but because we didn't really go full bore with all this extra steel and welding and everything, we tried to adapt the new system to the old car. Things started bending, things started breaking, a lot of forces that we didn't anticipate. So we learned a ton, which is great, and we've applied that to how the system is built this year. And it's much more beefy, so that's good. But the system works, you can see we've got a push rod back here that acts on a rocker. This rocker has a back wheel, goes into bump. This rocker rotates, squeezes on the puck. We can change the motion ratio of the puck by moving our spring mount up and down through these 5 different holes. We can also make tuning changes by changing the diameter of the durometer, how hard that rubber puck is. So it'd be just like changing a spring for the spring rate on your race car. So we can put in softer and stiffer springs or rubber inside there. So the rear of the car, if you remember at the very beginning I was talking about roll centers. The rear of the car has this system that we've invented. So as far as I know, something like this does not really exist out on anybody else's car anywhere. But this is so here's the rear axle carrier. On this class of car, you're required to have one solid axle in the rear, so both wheels are tied together. It's driven by a chain. The sprocket's not on the axle yet, but the whole system turns as one, so there's no differential or anything. But in order to carry that axle, we have what I call our axle carrier, which has a couple bearings in it. It's also what holds our brake. So our brake caliper, you can tell, is mounted to it. But this system needs to be held in position so that when the car turns, it can't move side to side, so laterally across the car. We want it to stay fixed in position. To do that, we've developed this, what Dan has been calling the Harty arm. So it's named after some guy named Harty that we know from one of the forums that we visit. I haven't met this guy, but he sounds totally cool, so I need to tell him, hey, you need to come check out the car and this part that is named after you someday. But we'll see if we can track him down. The Harty arm works by, there's this receiver that's built into the rear axle. This lower part, I think you can see that there. Let me make sure you can see it. This lower part you can unbolt and slide up and down. There's a Heim joint in here, which allows this to not only rotate up and down, but also side to side. So it allows the car to roll. So by unbolting this and moving it up and down, I can change where my roll center is for the car by moving it up, moving it down. So I've got, not much, a couple inches of change that we can change the roll center, but I can do it between runs, which is great. That's kind of unheard of for a lot of cars in autocross. So we can adapt, if we were to put rain tires on and get the, if it was downpour, I would probably want to raise the roll center a little bit. So there'd be a little bit weight transition that happens and hopefully keep the rear end behind the car. When it's dry, I like having the roll center as low as possible. I feel like the car handles a little bit better. Like I said before, when we got the car, the roll center was even with the axle. And since we run an 18-inch diameter wheel, that means that the roll center was at 9 inches above the ground. So now we've got it drastically different. The car feels a million times better. And we're really happy with that change. But yeah, getting ready for the 2017 season. Hopefully we'll get some actual rubber wheels on here instead of these alignment plates that I've made. Although these do make it really handy to weigh the car and make sure everything is square and straight. You can see some of the paperwork here showing some of the dimensions that we use. We've been using all different types of CAD programs, and everything from SketchUp, which is totally free, to SolidWorks, which is an industrial 3D design program. So it's been quite a fun project. Really looking forward to getting in the car, driving it this year. Like I said, it already feels a million times better just in the assembly process. I just feel a lot more confident with how everything's going together. So pretty excited about the car and the team this year. So we've got, like I said, Dan Wheeler, who is my co-driver, and then we've got two other women in the car, Jessica Dorn and Andy Albin. They'll be in the FML class, which has to be the best name for a car class in autocross. But that is it. So we will be out at the events this year. Come by, say hi. Love to show you the car in person. If you have any questions, leave them below. I will be around. Thanks for watching.